My name is Alper. I'm a recovering penetration tester. If we were in person, that's where we would say something like, "Hi, Alper," and tell me maybe that this is a secure environment. Anyway, I digress. I'm working as a cybersecurity consultant for, I think it's my 25th year in business on that topic. And what happened is that for most of these 25 years, I was working as a penetration tester. And one day I got a call a few years ago, maybe some 6, 7 years ago, from a municipality here in Turkey. Actually, one of the larger municipalities, not the largest, but one of the larger. And the question was quite simple. They had a ransomware incident and they just asked around, and some companies mentioned or said that they could decrypt the files for a certain fee. And their question was, can I do it cheaper? And my first question to them was, what was that server that was impacted? They told me it was a file server. And my second question was it in the DMZ area? They said no. So I said, it's an internal server. Yes. And at this point, I'm pretty sure that the gentleman I was talking to uh, was almost sure he dialed the wrong number, because there's no way someone even remotely interested in cybersecurity could be asking those stupid questions. And I followed my questions with, so who checked their emails using that server? They told me no one. I said, okay, who just use it to surf the internet, maybe to go to an adult website or to a betting website? They told me no one. And still I could hear their voice changing with each of my questions. And my last question was, okay, did you insert any USB drives? And that's where they lost it. And they told me, sir, this is an internal server. No one is using it for their personal uh, use. And okay, my next question was, so how do you think that ransomware got there? And that's where they just paused and they told me whatever price I would give, they would accept it. They just wanted me to come over because no one had asked them that question so far. But me, as a penetration tester, my instinct was, okay, there's an internal server. It was somehow compromised. How could they have done it? And it turns out, after some investigation, that the whole municipality was compromised in July. Mind you, that's a couple of years, that's many years ago. And yeah, it was an exposed RDP. In fact, the system administrator just opened an RDP to his own computer because I quote them, they wanted to work from home. And while they were on the way home, someone found the exposed RDP, that the password was stupidly easy, and they breached the municipality. And within a few hours, they got DC admin rights with a user they've created. So they had their own admin account. No one had noticed it. And they pretty much went everywhere and stole city plans and used their mail server and mail accounts to spearfish other municipalities across Turkey. But one thing that really fascinated me is that there was a CSV file the municipality used for employee salaries. So at the end of each month, that CSV file would be sent to the bank with the employee name, the amount to be sent to them, and a bank account number. And that file was also compromised, and all the bank account numbers were changed to that of the attackers. That's something I had never heard until then, and I've never seen since then. And this encryption or ransomware attack occurred in August, so they had largely amount to work and do all these things. And this, in fact, opened for me the path of incident response. And yeah, there are similarities between penetration testing and incident response. Of course, there are differences, but they're pretty much the same since we are on the same timeline. There is an incident, so whatever happens after the incident is incident response. Whatever happens before that is penetration test. I'll get into more details. It's not that simple, I know, but I'll just start by pointing out some similarities or some tools and techniques and knowledge a penetration tester might have that could be useful for incident response. The first one, of course, is having an understanding of attack vectors. This is the reason I had to ask all these stupid questions. How did they get there? What have they done? And how? Again and again until I found the root cause. So from people coming strictly from blue team and that are maybe a bit too attached to vendors, I'm sure you also have that profile, whichever country or state you're from. They tend to overlook that aspect of incidents or vulnerabilities. Okay, there's a vulnerability, it can be exploited. That's the extent of it. We, as penetration testers, usually go a bit deeper. How can it be exploited? Because a vulnerability that requires user interaction and a vulnerability that wouldn't require any user interaction would mean two separate attack vectors for us. Or a warmable vulnerability would be much different than a vulnerability that is only exploitable under certain conditions. This is something useful for both penetration testing and incident response. Again, all our knowledge on networking, operating system, scripting, be it Bash, Python, or PowerShell, all these are very useful and quite helpful, in fact, for incident response, because we know what operating system should be doing under normal conditions, or what it shouldn't be doing under certain conditions. Analytical thinking, another common trait between incident response and penetration testing. We need to identify potential attack vectors. When we conduct a penetration test, we try to find a way in. And in incident response engagements, I sometimes or quite often find myself thinking of that path. What could they have done? And as you might know from incident response courses that you might have taken in the past, what we try to do mostly is to come up with a theory and then come up with proofs that would falsify or deny that theory to make sure that we are not misguided by our own thoughts or preconceptions. There are tools that we use in penetration testing that are quite and almost certainly useful in incident response. Wireshark is just one of them, but many other tools could be used in both in penetration testing and incident response. Reporting, I know most of penetration testers don't like writing reports. I never really was a fan of writing reports. But it turns out the more reports you write in incident response, the better your whole incident response process becomes. Because I often talk with companies that have some kind of incident response team or a security operation team, internal in-house teams, that is, and they face incidents, but no one really bothers to write any report. How the incident occurred, when it occurred, why it occurred. And it comes to a point where after some years, one or two people from that team have some knowledge of incident response based on their past experience. And since nothing is documented, when they leave the company, the knowledge leaves with them. That's why it's important in incident response to have reports. And writing reports and documenting everything that we find is a reflex that we gain from penetration testing. Knowing how a protocol should work, how many ping or ICMP echo requests are acceptable under normal conditions, just seeing too many random looking subdomains requested by a DNS, all these. For example, when you look at them as a penetration tester, you immediately think of a tunnel like SCMP tunnel or DNS tunnel. So these reflexes that we gain over the years on how protocols are exploited are useful in incident response. Problem-solving abilities goes without saying, attention to details, and ongoing education, of course, because we are never over. We never end learning. We always have to learn new things and new vectors and new tools, maybe. So it's a way of life. It becomes a way of life, this continuous education, and it's also something that we would be useful in incident response. Collaborating with other IT teams. As a penetration tester, I sometimes go to companies where, in Turkey, maybe you know it. I'm sorry, I said In Turkey, it is customary to offer tea to whoever comes to your office or home or whatever. And when I go to some companies as a penetration tester, I'm not offered tea. This, without being an offense in itself, is not really the social norm. And it turns out that some companies do have this idea that I'm there to point out their mistakes or what they are doing wrong. That's why they don't like me. The IT team doesn't really like me. They don't enjoy me being there. So the first couple of days, they don't ask for tea. They don't offer me tea, coffee, or even lunch. But at the end of the third or fourth day, once they understand that I'm there to make them more secure, then things change. But when you're confronted with this profile long enough, people who have to have that penetration test for compliance purposes, just let's do it and get over with it. It's, just checking a box. Once these people start understanding that you're there for their sake, a nice cooperation develops. And whether you know it or not, working several years as a penetration tester will help you develop that reflex where you try to play nice with the IT teams. And in incident response, especially in larger places where one team is in charge of systems, one team is in charge of network, one team is in charge of the firewalls, coordinating those teams as a third-party incident responder sometimes becomes your duty because they don't like each other in-house. And you have to develop those soft skills. That being said, penetration testing is not incident response because, as I mentioned earlier, whatever we do as a penetration tester, that's before whatever happens, and incident response mostly is whatever you do that follows the incident. We are more, as penetration testers, focused on a proactive approach to cybersecurity. We are trying to avoid things, and incident response would be more focused on a reactive approach in that sense. Unfortunately, penetration tests has a defined scope or a specific time frame, which is really not the case for incident response. Me, as a penetration tester, I could be talking to a customer that would say that, okay, these servers, we know they're old, we know they're unpatched, we'll just leave them out of scope. Whereas these are most probably the ones that an attacker would go after first, or the ones that would be affected by a worm or a malware before whatever more secure server they have. This is one of the reasons we sometimes fail as penetration testers. Fail in the sense that, yeah, we do our job, the company gets their box checked, but we do not do everything that we could have done to make them more secure. Again, the wide scope of incidents sometimes may require physical presence in a remote location. It happens, whereas in penetration testing, you can conduct the whole engagement pretty much remotely. Penetration tests are scheduled, everyone expects them, everyone is ready for them, whereas incidents are more like the Spanish Inquisition. No one really expects them. Yes, we are talking about them. Companies have investments just in place just to avoid or limit the effects of incidents, but no one is really expecting it when it happens. We aim as penetration testers to improve the overall security, whereas incident response is more a damage control task in that sense. And we say that penetration test simulates attacks, but that, based on the point earlier about the scope and the time frame, might not always be the case, whereas an incident is the attack itself. It's the real deal. The main difference, of course, will be at first glance between incident response and penetration testing. We tend to say, okay, that's the red team, that's the blue team. These are the guys that think offense. These are the people that think defense. But as the industry has finally come to realize it over the years, it's not that red and blue. Having the offensive mentality during the incident response could be quite helpful. The tools at the disposal of penetration testers and the blue team might be different. And again, all incident response situations are not equal. So in some cases where you would have a nicely managed network and systems where everything is patched, where they do have nice tools such as EDRs and SIEMs at their disposal, and in other places you wouldn't have much to work with, and this is where you would go more instinctively, maybe, in the incident response phase. Sometimes when we are lucky, we get a customer that says, okay, we have finished the penetration test. Now let's, discuss it from an incident perspective. What would have happened if this was a real incident? As I said, sometimes it happens and we feel very lucky to have these kinds of customers, whereas incident response directly deals with the incidents itself. And as I mentioned earlier, some of the cases where we conduct a penetration testing engagement, it's just checking a box for compliance or for a policy or procedure or whatnot, whereas incident response is not really limited to compliance. Of course, you will have some reporting, some regulations that would make you report within a certain time range that the incident has occurred and the people impacted by the incident, which is not really the case in penetration tests. So we do have all this to say that we do have some transferable skills. And looking at the incident response process step by step, I will try to point out a few that I think would be more useful in an incident response scenario. The first one, of course, would be threat modeling. If you're not doing this as a penetration tester, maybe you should start doing it. And for incident response, also, threat modeling could be useful. Of course, this is under preparation because normally or ideally you would do the threat model before anything happens. But even when conducting an incident response, having a threat model could help you better understand what you do or what you are facing. And for this, I usually use Microsoft threat modeling tool, which is quite easy to use and it's free, and I don't really see any reason why people would not use it. whatever incident response scenario you are faced, you could just build an easy, quick model like the one shown here. We just have a web application that has a backend server that uses a web service for maybe user management or login, which is connected to a SQL database, and maybe it interacts with cloud storage somehow. And you could just establish the connections. Of course, as you might know from reading on the subject, what is quite important for us are trust boundaries. So what is the part I do control, what is the part that is not in my control. And based on that, you could just easily and quickly come up with potential attack vectors or potential threats. Before the incident, that's a nice to have. You could just go point by point and see if you have covered them. But during an incident, having something quickly cooked up and say that you are responding to a user compromise or user credential is being stolen, or maybe someone has changed their rights on the application, you could just directly select those that would, for example, allow spoofing, okay? And you would have the points that maybe could be the first ones that you would want to look at. I find it makes incident response easier in a sense because I know what to look at, especially in places where they do not have a SIEM solution already in place, or where the maturity is somewhat low or not where we would like it to be. So it's not only a tool you use or you can use before the incident or in preparation of an incident, it's also something very handy to have during the incident. Identification, that's the second step in the largely accepted incident response model. A better penetration test would or could lead to a better SIEM configuration or a better detection configuration. Again, it's something that you can use before the incident. For example, after each penetration test engagement, I could just open up my logs and see the attacks that I could detect and those that I could stop. Of course, I could do this together with the company that conducts the penetration tests, in a simulation type of engagement, or even if I have to do these penetration tests for just compliance, that could also be useful. A tool, again, that I use both before, wherever I'm preparing the company's, the organization's incident response team, and also during incident response engagement, is the DETECT framework. You all have seen this, the MITRE ATT&CK enterprise metrics, and we go on and on about this and how useful it is. Well, the tool that I use is this one, is DETECT. And what I try to do at the beginning of any incident response engagement, especially if it's a company that we didn't work with before, I just try to get an overview of what I'll be able to see or what tools are at my disposal. This is where I use this solution. It's hosted on github.io. So what I do is just create a test, and every time I add a data source, I'll just zoom in here, it will help me see what I can see. For example, just going back to the user scenario, okay, if there is a new user creation, are you able to see that? And they would tell me, yes, we are able to see that. Yeah, we keep those logs. Okay, do you send those logs to the SIEM? Yes, no. Okay, if they do, yes, it's available for analytics. What product does that? Maybe they are using Sysmon, I don't know. And here you will have some indicators of data quality. For example, yeah, we gather those logs from all possible sources. Or no, we only have them here at the main office, but the branches and remote offices, we don't get those logs. Okay. When do they come to your SIEM? Yeah, we get them every 24 hours, or yeah, we get them instantly. How long do you keep them? And once we go over different, this was for user creation. Let's add another data source. Okay, DNS tunnel. Do you have anything about? Do you keep the logs for internal DNS? You go point by point with the customer. And what this does, I will not get into the demo because there's a command line tool that will convert the YAML file that you here prepare into a file that you can just import to the MITRE ATT&CK Navigator, saying use open existing layer and get this. And what this shows, or it shows me as an incident responder, is what I can expect to see. So if I need, for example, anything related to privilege escalation or defense evasion in this scenario, I know that I will not be getting anything from the customer. But, things related to command and control traffic, yeah, I might have some ideas. So it also gives me an idea on where it would be best to start the investigation, if that makes sense. Yeah, in this case, I would try to find the command and control center traffic using, for example, the firewall logs, and then work my way upwards to the systems that were infected. In conclusion, we want to be this guy, over-prepare, but we also need to prepare for what's coming, not what has already happened. It's a quote from a French general. And see to have an idea on how the FBI has changed its mentality or not. You can just watch Paul Harrell's video on the topic. It will also give us an idea. So if you are an organization, hire your penetration tester to conduct the penetration test, but also have them conduct a threat model, or just have an incident response plan walk through with them. Use your penetration test report as a mock incident. So how would you have detected it, and how could it make your incident response better? And if you are a penetration tester, just spend some time on these two courses, because as a penetration tester also capable of incident response, that would also help you advance tremendously in your career. That's it for me. Thank you very much.